Hi there, Christian Henson from Spitfire here, presenting something I'm so proud of, our new Spitfire Studio Strings range, which for me is possibly our most versatile strings library to date. The size of the library is kind of roughly halfway between our chamber range and our symphonic range, but the key here is it's recorded in Studio One at Air Studios, not the Hall. So the main appeal for me is about definition and control. I worked on the trailer for this new library, and I just wanted to take you through how I constructed that from our Studio Strings range. My favourite sound in, say, chamber strings and Albion 2 and our symphonic range is always the flautandos. I tend to write with those, and that is no exception with the Studio series. So what I did is I created a kind of faux ensembles patch, and what I tend to do with these is use the first violins and the cellos. The violins are on this side, the firsts, and the cellos are on this side, so you get this widescreen broad sound which is balanced left and right. But I don't use the seconds and the violas because when I'm writing I tend to use kind of block chords, and because every time you're hitting one note you're playing the entire section, I find with the seconds and the violas in place what tends to happen is it tends to muddy the effect and it'll steer my writing accordingly. So I set up this kind of false ensemble with just the kind of outer limits of the band involved, and then simply, as always with my writing really, simply played something that was kind of motif-led, which is something along the lines of this. So I play that in just with both hands, not using any controllers, and as you can see, that's all laid in there, and then with this nice kind of section at the end, which is this kind of slightly more bassy bit. And you can hear there's some expression there. What I tend to do is draw that in afterwards. So I use a mixture of expression and dynamic control. Expression, the way I describe that, is a way of balancing the band against the other instruments, and dynamic control affects the timbre, the perceived loudness, intensity of playing. So basically I just play that back and then program in some natural kind of ebbs and flows. You'll see that it is a gradual crescendo all the way up, but it's going in waves. It's not just a straight line. So if you're going to use a controller, just ebb and flow. If you're going to program it in, don't just do a straight line. Ebb and flow, just as the players would play it. They tend to, when they climb into a note, they tend to open it up, put these little hairpins in, as they call them. So that's basically the starting point. So the objective now is to flesh out what each section is doing. And all I do is I simply copy this part up to basically different firsts, seconds, violas, and cellos, and I just simply delete the notes that I don't want each section to play. But before doing that, I replay in the lead line. The thing you want to hear the most, you need to get that down early so that when you arrange stuff around it, you can make sure that you're cutting the right holes out so that you can hear that top line. So what I've done here is I've gone to the first violins. You've got 3 different sized bands. This is again what makes it so versatile. So you've got 12 down, and then you've got 8 down, which is the kind of original band, and then you've got divisi, which is cutting the sections in half. I've gone for the 8 band because I want quite a kind of spectacular sound for this trailer. Let's pick out that top line. So the way I play it is I tend to make sure that the next note is down before releasing the previous. But also on these, if you have a look here, there are two forms of legato. There's the kind of the quick legato and the slow portamento glissandi, which is where they slide between the notes. So if I just play very quietly, it'll switch, you'll see, to the slower legato. So fast first and then slow. Just to give it a bit of coloration, a bit of expression. So that's the next step for me, is to get down the top line. And I've also employed the cello legatos at the end here to really give a sense of that movement there. What the legatos do for me is they not only join up the dots, but they're also, I guess they're kind of mother's singing voice. They're the top line, your lead singer. And you'll see what I've done for both the violins and the cellos here is I've really dug out that transition. This is so we can really hear that transition, the slide between the notes when the rest of the non-legato instruments go in momentarily. Okay, so now the top line's down. So then what I've done is I've created individual tracks for the sections, for their long articulations. And you'll see I've stuck to flautando. So it's a combination of violins playing flautando and just standard normal but consort, which gives a lovely soft silky kind of quality. And then we go through the seconds, so that's 6 seconds. The violas, 6 violas. The celli, 6 of those. And basically, as I mentioned before, I simply assigned a note for each section to play. So let's put the lead line in and let's listen to what the first violin accompaniment is doing. So they would be, theoretically, if they were playing this live, divisi. And I love that mixture of legatos and the flautando. You don't really hear the gaps between the notes of the flautando. It sounds to me like a natural string section settling between the notes. So basically, I assigned that accompanying part to the firsts, and then I simply played in the expression and the dynamics so that at no point is it eclipsing the top line played in the legato part. So let's have a listen to how that sounds with all of these flautandos, violas, cellos, seconds, and our top line. So what we can hear there is the legatos are really building to an espressivo kind of climax at the end, but the flautandos aren't really keeping up, and that's because they're designed as a soft, less expressive articulation. So what I've done, and it's quite a kind of cheap trick really, is I've just duplicated exactly the same parts, the flautandos, into a consordino patch, which has this lovely soft sound. I just love the sound of that room, absolutely fantastic. And I've simply automated those up. So let's have a listen to that. You'll hear this silky texture come in at first. And then if you listen to the balance between the legatos here and the rest of the band, you'll hear that, making a total Horlicks of this, you'll hear that it's a kind of better balance. The band with the legatos, our lead line, our top liner, our singer, is kind of keeping up. So let's just have a quick listen to that. Now, something always tends to happen at this point, and that is I kind of miss my original flautando sketch. I guess it's a combination of the cello playing flautando unnaturally high, but also there's a flautando on the lead line, which we've lost. So I add the flautando ensemble back in, just to, I don't know, slightly blur the edges, if you will, offer a little bit of warmth, a little bit more silk. Final little additions at the end there are then the CBs, the contrabasses, the basses. So let's listen to the end with the flautando ensemble in. We've got this high tremolando at the very end, just to give even more kind of expressiveness, and the basses at the very end. absolutely fantastic. And you hear at the end there, you don't need every section to do that legato transition. Just a couple of the cellos on the right here, the firsts on the left here. That's enough to give you a sense that the whole band is portamentoing, and it doesn't sound like a kind of a slidey comedic mess. So that's basically the longs. Then I moved on to some counterpoint. Now, the way that I often write for smaller bands is, in Britain, basically, you're not allowed to double track bands, but you're allowed to double track if you do it over 2 sessions. So in the mornings, what I'll tend to do is all of the longs and the top lines, and in the afternoons, I'll tend to do all of the shorts, things like ostinatos, that kind of stuff. The reason for doing that is so that I can stem it out for productions, but it also basically means that you get twice the size of the band. Now, what I've found over the years is if you just double track a band, it tends to just sound like a double tracked band. So basically orchestrating it as 2 separate bands, a longs articulation, lots of lush reverb, and shorts with lots of movement and definition, I find this is the most controllable use of a smaller band trying to kind of sound big. So I basically went in and again just created some like mini ensembles. So the firsts and seconds playing the spiccato, super short, and our violins and cellos. So as we move on to the shorts, I want to talk to you about the mics and how I perceive using this room in conjunction with reverbs. So to access the mics in the professional version, what you need to do is click on the spanner. And the mix I've gone for is something that Paul recommended me checking out, which is the close mics really being the predominant mic and the outriggers being in there slightly kind of ducked back. Usually I would just add a touch of close mic. I wouldn't go for those at all. But the whole point of this library is the definition. So Simon, the amazing engineer that we used on this, has really focused in on the selection of close mics. They're not too brittle. They have a great kind of warm quality, but give you that real definition. So maybe we should just have a listen to the difference between those two. So if we bring the outriggers, if you bring them all the way down to the bottom, they'll unload the samples. You have to remember this isn't one microphone, this is several microphones, one on each desk, and it's a mix of all of those together. So you still get a little bit of that room, so it's not totally in a vacuum. It doesn't sound like it's been recorded in outer space. So let's pull those back. There we go, and then let's have a listen to the outrigger. And I think this is a great demonstration of how the room can really blur the sound of the kind of attack of the note. And this is where Studio Strings really comes into its own. So let's duck that back. It's about halfway between those 2 points there. And then close mics there. So you get the attack of the close mics, the warmth of the room, and this is the point at which I start talking about reverbs. Now, for me, the purpose of recording in a smaller room like this is to create definition. It isn't to create necessarily a bone-dry score. So this is usually the point at which I start auditioning a reverb so I can start writing to what the end product is going to sound like. And after the reverb shootout that Jake Jackson and I did, linked below, I've kind of settled for my favourite, the Lexicon. So let's have a quick listen to the violin spiccato part. For me, this is, I think, a really special part of this library because it gives that very real sound. It doesn't have that, I don't know, that slightly blurred edge, that kind of fuff sound that you get in the hall. It's real. This is what a smaller band playing spiccatos sound like. But what I decided to do at the beginning is to alter the intensity of the spiccatos. So I went for these Consordino brushed, very soft, slightly longer shorts. So basically start with the brushed and then slowly fade in the spiccato. I don't know why the automation isn't showing for the brush, but you'll see the fade of movement as the brushes just slowly fade away. So slowly growing with intensity. I then have a counterpoint with the violas and cellos, playing more kind of 16-y stuffs. And again, the whole band growing in intensity throughout this passage. see it gradually getting redder as I hit it harder. We then introduce some pizzicato basses. And then you'll see I'm fading in some col legno here, which is when they play the instrument with the back of the bow. This, again, just as things get washier, bigger, just gives that kind of bright, brittle kind of definition. Just hear it coming in there. Absolutely amazing sound, but not the kind of woofy, woolly sound that you get in a larger room. It's really pinpoint, kind of precise, even when I add the reverb on top. Final part of the jigsaw is I actually separate it out into separate firsts, seconds, violas, and cello shorts. And the reason for doing that is you'll see here that we're actually staggering the notes, so you get this kind of spatial effect. And the very last phrase, they all play together, which I thought was kind of quite a neat trick. So it's the same note being played by each section. Awesome, and that's basically it. So a total of 23 tracks to create this very defined but quite epic sound befitting of a launch of a totally new series. I'm going to run that down, but as always, thanks ever so much for watching. Linked below is the page where you can get more information about this new Studio Strings series, loads of brilliant videos, walkthroughs by Paul. We've also got a version of this track without the reverb on, so you can really hear what the room is doing and how reverb, when applied, I'd say somewhat liberally, can create that epic widescreen sound that you're looking for, but with control at your fingertips and that definition you really want to hear. Every note being played on every one of those brilliant, amazing instruments by those brilliant players. Thanks as always for watching. If you like what we do, hit like. If you haven't subscribed yet, lots of exciting stuff coming up. And if you want to be notified the next time we put a video up, just hit that little bell icon. See you next time.